Welcome to Monday Mornings with Michael. I'm Michael Pate. Glad to have you here. Today we're tackling one of the toughest questions. Why does God sometimes say, "not yet," to our prayers? It's one of those things that can feel like a mystery, but it's something we all face. So let's dig into what might be happening when we find ourselves stuck in that waiting game. As Christians, we talk a lot about faith and prayer. But if we're honest, most of us have had those moments when we've prayed, waited, and still nothing. We're left wondering, God, are you even listening? Why is there no answer? And it's frustrating. We've done all the right things. We've prayed, we've believed, we've maybe even fasted, and yet there was silence. And sometimes that silence can make us feel forgotten or abandoned. But here's the thing, you're not alone in feeling that way. The Bible is full of people who had to wait for God to answer their prayers. Think about Abraham. He waited for decades for the son God had promised him. Or the Israelites who were wandering around for 40 years in the wilderness before reaching the promised land. These stories aren't just about waiting. They're about trusting that God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't line up with our expectations. Let me share a story with you that might hit home. A close friend of mine had been praying for years to find the right job. You know how it is. He had bills piling up, he was supporting his family, and he just couldn't catch a break. Every time a job interview seemed promising, something would fall through, and it wasn't just one time, it kept happening over and over. He felt defeated and began to question why God wasn't opening a door. During one of our conversations, he shared how deeply frustrated he was. He'd been doing everything right, in his opinion, working hard, staying faithful, even tithing on what little he had. He couldn't understand why God was saying not yet, when it felt like everything was just simply falling apart. But then, out of nowhere, after months of dead ends, he was offered a position at a company that not only provided him what he needed financially, but also allowed him to grow in his faith and use his skills to make a difference in the ways he hadn't even imagined. Looking back, he realized that if any of those other opportunities had worked out, he would have missed out on what God really had in store for him. God wasn't saying no to those other jobs. He was preparing the perfect fit, but it took time. It's in the waiting that God was shaping him for what was coming. One of the most striking examples in the Bible of this is Joseph. God gave him a dream that one day he'd be in a position of leadership. But before that dream came true, Joseph had to endure betrayal, slavery, and years in prison. It wasn't easy, and it didn't make sense at that time. But looking back, we can see that God was preparing him all along. David is another example. He was anointed king as a young man, but it took years of running, hiding, and waiting before he actually became king. Did David get frustrated? Sure. But God's delay wasn't a denial. It was part of David's journey to become the king he was meant to be. I think that's where we get stuck sometimes. We see waiting as punishment, or worse, as God forgetting about us. But what if we shifted our perspective? What if God's not yet is actually an opportunity to grow in patience, to trust him more deeply, and to become more of what he's calling us to be? When we're in that season of waiting, we have a choice. We can get frustrated and bitter, or we can lean in, trusting that God's plan is better than anything that we could imagine. The Bible reminds us in Isaiah 55:8-9 that God's ways are not our ways, and his timing is not our timing. What feels like a delay could actually be God preparing us for something that's even greater than we ever asked for or what we imagined. So if you're in that waiting season right now, know that God hasn't forgotten about you. His silence isn't a no, it's a not yet. And in that not yet, there's growth, transformation, and deepening of faith. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you've ever felt like you're in the waiting room of life, I'd love to hear your story, so drop it in the comments below. Be sure to comment, like, and please hit that subscribe button. If you want to go deeper, check out this video, and I think you'll really enjoy it. I'll see you next Monday morning on Monday Mornings with Michael.